everyone, I'm Margie O'Brien with Capital Spotlight. Things are certainly getting busy this session.
For sure.
Representative Joe Shekarchi is joining me now. It really has moved at a very quick pace.
It traditionally does, and when we have election years, we tend to move everything faster, and the goal from everybody involved is to try to get out in early June versus late June. So that's why you see an accelerated timetable and things are happening. Also, we had some big legislation early in the session, which is unusual. Some of that was the holdover stuff from last session, and we're moving fast now. We're going, all hands on deck. We're working on the budget and all on legislation going forward.
So we've passed the Good Samaritan Act, roadworks, and now we're moving forward. One of the big talkers has been whether Rhode Island will be the first in Rhode Island to have legalized marijuana. What's your take on that?
I'm open personally to marijuana. I'm a data-driven guy, so I want to hear the data and hear the testimony. For every one person who wants legalization of marijuana, there's another person who doesn't want it. So we need to make it and do this right. We have to be cognizant of the financial aspects and how much revenue is coming in from Denver and Colorado, but we also have to balance that about the cost benefit. So I'm looking forward to the debate. I used to sit on judiciary, and there was always very spirited, passionate debates. I think this year you have a lot more of it. I think it will become the non-budget item that's left in the session. That's a big, significant item. I don't know if it'll pass this year, but I think every year it seems to be getting closer and closer to some kind of a legalization process. I don't know what that'll be or when it'll be, but we'll have to see what happens. I mean, there's pros and cons to it. We have to look at this from a medical aspect, from a children aspect, and then the fact that I went to a seminar, a legislative seminar with Electric Boat, and they have a lot of jobs they can't fill because a lot of people can't pass the drug test to work for a defense contractor. So you have to weigh that with the legalization, and do we want this, or do we want the revenue of it, and does it affect children? How does that work? I mean, there's a lot of pros and cons to both sides of that issue.
So there's an allure to being number one in New England, but you also don't want to rush it and end up shooting yourself in the foot.
We have to remember that it's still considered illegal by the federal government. It's not allowed in housing authority complexes, and it's still a crime federally. Now, this administration in Washington is not prosecuting it, but we don't know what the next administration would do. So these are things that are thoughts, pluses and minuses we have to look at.
And your comment about Electric Boat, it really is all about jobs and the economy here in Rhode Island, and you don't want to make sure that you rule out certain people working in Rhode Island by this. How do we go forward with building on jobs?
We need to continue to do what we're doing. We had a very productive last session. The first year of the governor worked very hard with the Speaker and the Senate President to put some great economic incentive act. My jobs bill, which after 3 years passed last year, we're starting to see some results of that, which is exciting. In January, a company from Lincoln is expanding based upon that. Even today's Providence Journal, another company here in Rhode Island, is moving from Attleboro to Rhode Island to expand, taking advantage of that jobs credit. So I'm looking at that. That's part of my legislative package this year, to see if we can actually broaden that. It seems to be a good program. It's revenue neutral. It's bringing jobs to Rhode Island. So I want to continue on that.
For those people who don't know about the jobs plans, what is the benefit for a company?
What it is if you're a company and you pay a high-paying wage, approximately $50,000 a year, and you hire people in that salary range, pay them benefits and a retirement package, their income tax that they pay to the state would go back to the company. As long as the person had held a job for a year, it's a tax credit that's paid after the 1 year is completed and after that employee has paid their taxes into the state. So there's zero risk to the state. It's not another 38 Studios type of situation. It is basically a rebate of the employee's tax to the employer for keeping that job growing and available in Rhode Island.
All right, so we're shooting this the first day back after February break. Is there always sort of a renewed spirit once you've had a little time away?
Absolutely. Everybody has an excitement. Plus, we're getting closer to the budget. And this is the time. The first third of the legislature was the time we introduce legislation. The second time is we hear it, we consider it, and then we move it in the third part of the legislature. So this is an exciting time. We hope to wrap it up. The budget's a very large document. It's almost $9 billion. So that's going to have for a small state like Rhode Island, it's a very large budget. It's going to have a very thorough review before the House Finance Committee, and we'll consider those things. There's some really good things in the budget that we like. I think the indications are good.
Well, I was going to ask, at first blush, and also based on what the governor said in her budget remarks, what do you think?
I like the themes that she talked about. I like the focus on economic development. I think that that's important. I also, kind of selfishly from a Warwick point of view, I like the money, the incentive to be put in for help the airport and help the airport attract more flights. We have an expansion, thanks to Jack Reed and our federal delegation, of substantial federal funds going in there. We need to make sure that we build upon that. That airport's a first-class facility, and we want to see it succeed. So I'm very much in favor of that part of the budget. Her incentives to lure new airlines and new flights here.
But this is a time-sensitive issue. Everybody has to review the budget, and then you'll have to vote on it, of course. How does that work out?
We put a lot of faith in the Finance Committee. They literally go through every line of every article, and it's a public, transparent process. It's on Capitol TV, and you go through it, and people are allowed to comment, either by email or in person or by letter, and say whether they're for it or against it, and we consider all those things. And then we weigh that against our fiscal staff. We have a tremendously talented House fiscal staff that also gives the governor's staff a review, and then we wait for our May revenue numbers, and that's the final piece of the puzzle that we can base the budget on. Fortunately, this year things are looking good. Revenues are running slightly ahead of projections, and that's always good. And that's why last year we were able to take out some of the things in the governor's budget that we didn't like, the Taylor Swift Act and the cost of books for Catholic schools. Those things were originally put in when there was no amount. It was a forecast of a budget process in January. Now we'll have numbers in early May, and that'll be the final push to put the budget together.
So overall, Joe, do you think Rhode Island is moving forward?
Absolutely. I'm more optimistic today than this is only my second term, but it's my fourth year in the General Assembly. I'm more optimistic today of where we're heading and where the focus is. I'm glad, because the first 2 years, the focus seemed to be on social issues. Still important to the people that are affected, and I'm glad we did some of that stuff. But the last 2 years, last year and this year, is a strong focus on rebuilding the economy. We're moving better in New England and in the country, I bet slowly and not as much as I'd like it to happen, but we're moving in a good direction. And I feel there's a strong commitment by leadership in the House, in the governor's office, and in the Senate as well.
Representative Joe Shekarchi, thanks for joining me. We look forward to watching the progress over the next couple of months.
Always a pleasure, and glad to have you here at the State House. Thank you, Margie.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here. And that was another Capitol Spotlight. I'm Margie O'Brien.